Chapter 3 The Christmas Harp Great was the excitement in the houses of King as Christmas drew nigh. The air was simply charged with secrets. Everybody was very penurious for weeks beforehand, and hoards were counted scrutinizingly every day. Mysterious pieces of handiwork were smuggled in and out of sight, and whispered consultations were held, about which nobody thought of being jealous, as might have happened at any other time. Felicity was in her element, for she and her mother were deep in preparations for the day. Cecily and the Story Girl were excluded from these doings with indifference on Aunt Janet's part, and what seemed ostentatious complacency on Felicity's. Cecily took this to heart, and complained to me about it. "I'm one of this family just as much as Felicity is," she said, with as much indignation as Cecily could feel, "and I don't think she need shut me out of everything. When I wanted to stone the raisins for the mincemeat, she said no, she would do it herself, because Christmas mincemeat was very particular. As if I couldn't stone raisins right! The airs Felicity puts on about her cooking just make me sick," concluded Cecily wrathfully. "It's a pity she doesn't make a mistake in cooking once in a while herself," I said. "Then maybe she wouldn't think she knew so much more than other people." All parcels that came in the mail from distant friends were taken charge of by Aunts Janet and Olivia, not to be opened until the great day of the feast itself. How slowly the last week passed! But even watched pots will boil in the fullness of time, and finally Christmas Day came, grey and dour and frostbitten without, but full of revelry and rose-red mirth within. Uncle Roger and Aunt Olivia and the Story Girl came over early for the day, and Peter came too, with his shining morning face, to be hailed with joy, for we had been afraid that Peter would not be able to spend Christmas with us. His mother had wanted him home with her. "Of course I ought to go," Peter had told me mournfully, "but we won't have turkey for dinner, because Ma can't afford it. And Ma always cries on holidays because she says they make her think of Father. Of course she can't help it, but it ain't cheerful. Aunt Jane wouldn't have cried. Aunt Jane used to say she never saw the man who was worth spoiling her eyes for. But I guess I'll have to spend Christmas at home." At the last moment, however, a cousin of Mrs. Craig's in Charlottetown invited her for Christmas, and Peter, being given his choice of going or staying, joyfully elected to stay. So we were all together, except Sara Ray, who had been invited but whose mother wouldn't let her come. "Sara Ray's mother is a nuisance," snapped the Story Girl. "She just lives to make that poor child miserable, and she won't let her go to the party tonight either." "It is just breaking Sara's heart that she can't," said Cecily compassionately. "I am almost afraid I won't enjoy myself for thinking of her, home there alone, most likely reading the Bible, while we're at the party." "She might be worse occupied than reading the Bible," said Felicity rebukingly. "But Mrs. Ray makes her read it as a punishment," protested Cecily. "Whenever Sara cries to go anywhere, and of course she'll cry tonight, Mrs. Ray makes her read 7 chapters in the Bible. I wouldn't think that would make her very fond of it. And I'll not be able to talk the party over with Sara afterwards, and that's half the fun gone." "You can tell her all about it," comforted Felix. "Telling it isn't a bit like talking it over," retorted Cecily. "It's too one-sided." We had an exciting time opening our presents. Some of us had more than others, but we all received enough to make us feel comfortably that we were not unduly neglected in the matter. The contents of the box which the Story Girl's father had sent her from Paris made our eyes stick out. It was full of beautiful things: another red silk dress, not the bright flame-hued tint of her old one, but a rich dark crimson, with the most distracting flounces and bows and ruffles, and with it were little red satin slippers with gold buckles, and heels that made Aunt Janet hold up her hands in horror. Felicity remarked scornfully that she would have thought the Story Girl would get tired wearing red so much, and even Cecily commented apart to me that she thought when you got so many things all at once you didn't appreciate them as much as when you only got a few. "I'd never get tired of red," said the Story Girl. "I just love it. It's so rich and glowing. When I'm dressed in red I always feel so much cleverer than in any other colour. Thoughts just crowd into my brain one right after the other. "Oh, you darling dress! You dear, sheeny, red-rosy, glistening, silky thing!" She flung it over her shoulder and danced around the kitchen. "Don't be silly, Sara," said Aunt Janet, a little stimy. She was a good soul, that Aunt Janet, and had a kind, loving heart in her ample bosom, but I fancy there were times when she thought it rather hard that the daughter of a roving adventurer, as she considered him, like Blair Stanley, should disport herself in silk dresses, while her own daughters must go clad in gingham and muslin, for those were the days when a feminine creature got one silk dress in her lifetime, and seldom more than one. The Story Girl also got a present from the Awkward Man, a little shabby worn volume with a great many marks on the leaves. "Why, it isn't new, it's an old book!" exclaimed Felicity. "I didn't think the Awkward Man was mean, whatever else he was." "Oh, you don't understand, Felicity," said the Story Girl patiently. "And I don't suppose I can make you understand, but I'll try. I'd 10 times rather have this than a new book. It's one of his own, don't you see? One that he has read 100 times and loved and made a friend of. A new book just out of a shop wouldn't be the same thing at all. It wouldn't mean anything. I consider it a great compliment that he has given me this book. I'm prouder of it than anything else I've got." "Well, you're welcome to it," said Felicity. "I don't understand and I don't want to. I wouldn't give anybody a Christmas present that wasn't new, and I wouldn't thank anybody who gave me one." Peter was in the 7th heaven because Felicity had given him a present, and moreover, one that she had made herself. It was a bookmark of perforated cardboard, with a gorgeous red and yellow worsted goblet worked on it, and below, in green letters, the solemn warning, "Touch not the cup." As Peter was not addicted to habits of intemperance, not even to looking on dandelion wine when it was pale yellow, we did not exactly see why Felicity should have selected such a device. But Peter was perfectly satisfied, so nobody cast any blight on his happiness by carping criticism. Later on, Felicity told me she had worked the bookmark for him because his father used to drink before he ran away. "I thought Peter ought to be warned in time," she said. Even Pat had a ribbon of blue, which he clawed off and lost half an hour after it was tied on him. Pat did not care for vain adornments of the body. We had a glorious Christmas dinner fit for the halls of Lucullus, and ate far more than was good for us, none